They are merely an indication of what an institution would be, or a programme would be expected to show in order to show that they meet this criterion. And then the commentary here would be text. The reason we haven't put it in a table, because people may, or institutions may be submitting diagrams or tables or illustrative information here to support their commentary, to say why a criterion has been met or met with excellence. So as you can see, all the standards and criteria are there. It's quite a long document. And then at the end of each standard, there is a summary rating where the institutions will tally up their rating. They'll put it here. And then it's the overall rating for the standard. We'll talk a little bit later about how that's worked out. At the end of the document, we have the list of SM materials that we talked about. So you can see all 9 standards are here, all the criteria, and then at the end of the document, you have the list of supporting materials, which can be hyperlinked to documents that you refer to in your commentary. So hopefully that will give you an idea of what the standards assessment will look like. Okay, so the type of supporting materials we imagine that an institution or a programme will submit. The decree or the licence or the agreement to the licence from the Education Council for private institutions. For those institutions that have formal agreements with overseas institutions, they would be expected to be submitted. Strategic plan, annual reports, licences, bylaws and regulations, staff list, campus map, summary data. So these are the type of examples of materials that all institutions would be expected as a minimum to submit. The declaration, as we said earlier, will be expected to be signed off at the highest level of the institution to say that the information is complete and accurate and that the institution operates within national laws. This is the overview that we saw in the form, and the idea is that this overview kind of provides a context for the panel. When they read the application, they'll think, so that's who SQU is, that's how long they've been around, that's what their purpose is, and this is why we're carrying out this accreditation. As we've mentioned earlier, the standards and the commentary. Now, one thing, this isn't so relevant for the programme, but for the institutional accreditation, within the commentary or within that particular area, there is an expectation that the institution will say what it's done in terms of the affirmations and recommendations that were made in the quality audit report. Because this is a 2-stage cycle, it would be remiss of us not to pick up what had happened in quality audit. So the idea is that an institution will say, okay, in the area of graduate attributes, we received an affirmation, and this is what we've done, and since then we've done X, Y, and Z, and that's why we think we deserve this rating, and here is the evidence to show. So, and also in an area of commendation, where an institution has been doing something well, you show how you have continued to maintain that in order for that area perhaps to be awarded with merit. As we've mentioned, you provide a commentary describing how you meet this criterion. The commentary should be evidence-based. It's not an evaluation based on purely judgment. This is about, here's the evidence to support what we believe. The indicators, as we've said and we've repeated, it provides guidance for the type of processes and the type of practice that we expect to be referred to and which demonstrate how an institution meets the criteria. And the indicators are guidelines, and they won't be. The reason we keep saying this, at the very first iteration of the standards, the indicators had to be met. But with the response that we had, as has already been highlighted today, that the sheer number were appearing to be unrealistic, because it would have meant that if you didn't meet an indicator, you wouldn't have met accreditation, and it was unrealistic. So, but we're keeping the indicators there because we think they're helpful. And then underneath the actual standard, where you've rated yourself, you've got all the criteria, and you've given yourself an overall rating, under the standard you will give a commentary for why you think you've met the standard. You don't need to reiterate everything that's been put under each criterion, but you do need to give an overarching a summary statement or a text to say why you think that this standard has been met. And this would be done obviously after you've completed all the criteria. And this would be an example of standard commentary. This is the standard, the overall standard for student learning by coursework. And you can see that the statements are quite broad. And the idea is that the criteria offer if you like, the more granular detail of that area within the breadth of these statements. And these standards are available on our website for both the institution and programme, version 1. We're currently working on version 2 because we had extensive feedback, both from the international panel and from the sector in Oman, and we're working on version 2 of the standards, and hopefully that will be circulated after the summer. That's the plan. Anna and Janice have got big bags under their eyes because they've been working so hard at the moment, mapping those standards against each other, because we want to make sure that the programme are focusing on the programme and the institutional standards are focusing on the standards. Institution. This is what a criterion indicators look like. So this is criterion 2.1 for graduate attributes, and the indicators give guidance on how that criterion can be met. The evidence we've talked about, that the evidence should be listed, it should be systematically presented, and that the numbering should be the same, so that there would be consecutive numbering throughout the whole application rather than standard by standard. It's always a challenge for the Quality Assurance Office, but we know that looking from the panel perspective, that the more systematic we can be, the easier it is for them to be able to navigate the evidence. As we mentioned earlier, we've got the four ratings: one for not met, satisfactory, good, and excellent. And Dr. Salim's already shown you this. The reason we've done this is that we're going to have different panels, and we're going to have trying to come up with comparable outcomes. So we need a clear definition of what each rating means. And this is excellent. This is what is expected for something that will be ending up in merit. So we're talking about consistently very high quality here. We're underpinned by quality improvement. We're looking at things that exceed the requirements. We're looking at something that's highly effective. It isn't expected that all the characteristics would be met. We're looking at provision or practice is exceptional, and that all provision and practice would have systematic and effective quality improvement arrangements. So this would be a panel writing against an excellent criteria. This is the sort of text that a panel may write. And you can see what we're talking about here. This was revised, so we're talking about something that's the product of an ongoing quality improvement system that's innovative. Nobody else is doing it. It's successfully implemented. There was training. It's had a significant positive impact on retention and identifying at-risk students. The system has received significant positive feedback. It's been reviewed, and it's being continually approved. So this is what excellent looks like. When it comes to good, that we're still talking about consistently high quality in most areas, and it's underpinned again by quality improvement arrangements. Overall, that it exceeds the criterion requirements, and it's about high quality. It's more than met. And this is an example of good. So we've got a revised academic advising system, so it's part of a cycle of improvement. There's a comprehensive handbook and training. There's been implemented, systems had a positive impact, and this is where your institutional effectiveness monitoring comes in. And the HEI has clear plans for how the system will be evaluated. So it's different to excellent because it's not innovative, but it's good. It's doing what you want and more. When it comes to satisfactory, and this is the point that was raised earlier about what happens if it's not super duper. What we're saying is satisfactory is effective most of the time. We are trying to recognise the realities of an institution and how it operates. What we're saying, we still need adequate quality improvement arrangements, that it meets the requirements of the criterion as effective most of the time. We appreciate that an institution is always evolving. There are pockets of activity that's going really well. There are pockets of activity that are meeting the minimum standard but could be improved. And again, we need this quality improvement arrangements. And we did talk about ADRI, and I appreciate we're not talking about ADRI today. Anybody who's been on the external reviewer training will have been exposed to ADRI, but we can certainly give you the links to the ADRI training, which is one way of analysing your activity to look at your approach, your deployment, your results and improvement. And it's this kind of cycle to show that what you're doing is sustainable, it's not one-off, it hasn't just been put in place because you know you've got an accreditation coming, it's in the fabric and the fibre of the institutional behaviour. So this is an example of satisfactory. This institution, again, against criterion 6.5, it's implemented an effective formal academic advisory system, which overall, it's not absolutely perfect, but overall, it's supporting students in meeting their educational goals. There's a sense that the system has been evaluated, and there have been improvement plans which have been implemented in most departments. So what we're trying to get across is that we know that institutions can't do everything absolutely fine all the time, but they've got mechanisms in place to show that at least the minimum standard, most of the time, in most of the departments, are being met. Not met is where we say that the provision or practice does not meet the requirements of the criterion, and there are no effective quality improvement arrangements in place. Not applicable, that was referred to earlier, where it might not be applicable to you. For example, 1.13, it talks about oversight of external entities. Now, I'm not sure whether that's applicable to SQU or not, but if it's not, then you'd say this isn't applicable to us and why it isn't. So the idea is that there will be some institutions that, for example, research for some of the colleges won't be such a big area. So this is the again, going back to criterion 6.5, while the institution has a policy for academic advising, the system hasn't been implemented throughout the HEI and it's not been monitored or evaluated for effectiveness. This isn't going to meet the minimum standard. And this is 3.1, which is about student programs by research, which a lot of colleges wouldn't have, and they can say that because of their classification as a college, they wouldn't have this research and therefore this criterion wouldn't be applicable to them. So how do we calculate? It isn't cumulative, it isn't working out the average, it's modal. And the idea is 6.1, you've said, well, this is okay. You have to remember 2 is okay. 2 is you get accredited. If everything's 2, it'll be accreditation. 3 is good, and 4 is the icing on the cake, where you're saying this is exceptional, this is innovative, this is best practice. So you give the ratings here, and then the overall rating will be 2, because this is based on most, which is more than 50%. So if you look at how many we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we've got 2 of those have got a 3, but more than 50% have been given 2, so the overall outcome will be 2 satisfactory. And you may ask yourself, then why bother putting in the other numbers if you're all just going to work out that this is 2? Because as Dr. Salim showed in his presentation, you will be able to go to criteria level when you go on the OAAA website to be able to see how an institution performed against that particular criteria. So although it might not have an impact on the overall standard, the institution or the stakeholder can have a look at the institutions and look at 3 or 4 institutions and say, how did they do with graduate attributes? And they can have a look at criteria level for how institutions compared. Then when it comes to the standard rating, most of the criteria as rated as excellent, no criteria are rated as not met, will mean as excellent. So that's more than 50% are rated as 4, then the outcome will be excellent, or rating of 4. Most of the criteria are rated as good, no criteria are rated as not met, that will lead to good. And again, you may ask yourself, well, good doesn't actually, and you'll see, it doesn't result in excellent, but it does show an institution that it's more than satisfactory. And this again will be communicated to stakeholders through the access to data on the OAAA website. Most of the criteria are rated as satisfactory, no criteria rated as not met, which means you may have some criteria as good or as excellent, but overall, the outcome for that standard, the rating, will be satisfactory. And if one or more criteria are rated not met, the outcome will be not met. And this is the institution doing this first of all, and then it will be the panel going through the same process to see whether they agree with the rating of the institution.
Yes. Is it possible that an institution can be accredited with 1 not met?
No.
But the average could be...
But we're not working on average, it's modular.
But there were mostly 3s and 1 not met.
Then it would still be not met, because the criteria is one or more criteria are not met, is not met. It's not an adding up and working up the average. It's each one in its own merit. It's modular.
Yeah.
That's it. No. Yeah, absolutely. However, there is a however. If you are almost met, but you're not met because of one small item, or, one kind of irregularity that can be addressed within 2 to 3 months. So we're not talking about something systemic. We're talking about, just something that, I didn't know that license for that website needed to be signed, or whatever. Then that would be outcome deferred, which would mean that the institution would be given 2 or 3 months before the outcome would be, hopefully, that would lead to accreditation. So there is a window of opportunity for where it's, there may be a little aberration, and it's not, the rest of it, everything else was fine, but this one area. But the basic is, yes, 1 not met, that's it. One criteria not met, the whole thing falls out. And but when you see the criteria, this sounds horrific at the moment, but when you see the criteria and the level at which they're written, you'd think, well, SQU passed it all already. So I think you have to look at the indicators, as we say, guidelines, but the criteria are really what you would expect an institution to already be doing. So their standards are internationally benchmarked, and the idea is our accreditation decisions need to mean something. And all the areas, all the 75 applicable areas, have all got equal importance for an institution to be operating at a standard that can be internationally benchmarked. Okay, so this is the assessment outcome. This is the one that will go on the website as the headline, if you like, status. So most of the standards are rated excellent, so more than 50% are rated excellent, and everything else is satisfactory or good. It can be accredited with merit. All standards are rated as a minimum satisfactory, and 1 or more standards are rated excellent. That means they've got a 4. Then it will be advertised that that institution has merit in 1 or more standards. It will be accredited, but it's got merit for its student learning by coursework. It's accredited, and it's got a merit for research. All standards are rated either satisfactory or good, accredited. Bearing in mind, there may be an excellent in there somewhere, in the criteria level, but it won't necessarily have an impact on the assessment outcome. And 1 or more of the standards are not met, the institution will go on probation. Though I did mention this outcome deferred, which is this window of 2 to 3 months where a small, not incredibly significant, but just is the difference between met and not met. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, The reason we have these criteria of good, excellent, and met and not met is that then the public are able, or stakeholders or other institutions, are able to go in and compare. If we only had a 3-point rating, if we just had not met, met, excellent, you wouldn't have much of an opportunity for comparison. Whereas if you've got a 4-point rating scale, it gives us more of an opportunity to provide information to the public about how well our institutions are doing. And as we say, we are not pro-rankings, but what we're trying to do is provide something that people can provide their own weightings to, so they can decide which programme or which institution meets those particular needs or those particular areas of interest. For example, when I was looking at my son's university, the one I was interested in was graduate employability. That was something I was particularly interested in. So I wasn't particularly interested in rankings, but I wanted to see where does employability lie? And this system will allow stakeholders to be able to do that. These are the references, so please feel free to visit I'm looking forward to a lively Q&A. Yeah. I can see hands twitching already. And please feel free to delve deeper into what we hope will be an interesting debate on how you make those accreditation decisions.